Just tell me when you're ready.
All right, we are ready. Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Hassel. I'm a second and third grade teacher in Richland School District 2 and also a Midland area representative leader for the organization SC for Ed. And as an organization, we do not endorse parties. We do not endorse specific candidates. But what we do want to do is make sure that people who get to the polls on June 9th and eventually in November can make informed decisions as they go decide who to vote for, primarily around issues related to education. So that's the purpose of tonight's Q&A with two of our three candidates running for House 118. So we have incumbent Bill Herbkersman, who is a Republican, who in the primary will be running against Michael Covert. And then we also have with us Mitch Siegel, who will be running the Democrat unopposed. So he will be there in November. So we're going to start this evening by just giving each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit and talk a little bit about their platform and what brings them to this race. And Michael, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. I thank both of you for letting me join you and for all those that are watching. Again, my name is Michael Covert. I'm a resident of Beaufort County. Currently, I am I'm ending my term as a Beaufort County councilman for the 7th District here in Beaufort County, the greater part of Bluffton and portions of Okatee and Pritchardville. I am semi-retired. I'm a businessman, an entrepreneur in the heating and air conditioning industry. I've been in that business for about 35 years, sold my business last year, so hence the term semi-retired. I'm not ready to be full. I am in this race because I believe that South Carolina still has a lot of things that needs to be fixed. And I say that with an asterisk because most people know I ran a year-long campaign for Congress. And I stopped that because of some problems that we've identified in South Carolina. We have a huge platform, but I'm going to focus on one thing, and that's education for this particular discussion. We do have the 3 T's in my campaign. That's taxes, teachers, and term limits. But for teachers, and that really means all of education, we've identified that there are still some problems. In the State House, there's been a lot of talk about education and improving education, but there hasn't been anything really done about it. I'm tired of South Carolina being the Achilles heel in the nation of education, where we can be the envy of the nation. But some things have to happen. We have to get our own house in order, and that begins with paying teachers what they should be paid. We have a plan that we've put together that would take the starting teacher's salary with a bachelor's degree to $52,000 a year, a master's degree to $61,000. Well, how do you do that? Well, local property taxes should pay for local schools. But for that to happen, we have the big elephant in the room, and that's Act 388. When Act 388 was, when it started, it was a great idea, worked for a little while. Now, unless you're in the upstate, you can't stand it because our schools in Beaufort County are not being funded, and Jasper County being funded properly. The local government fund, it's not happening. Well, somebody has to stand up and speak out about Act 388. It needs to be repealed and go to a local property tax system that pays for local schools. We also have a platform that would give the incentive for teachers to move to areas of the state that are what most would consider, high cost of living. They just can't afford to live Hilton Head Island, Kiowa Island, on a salary that's like $31,000 or $32,000 a year. It just doesn't work. Well, we have a plan to create a educational housing trust fund, working with local governments, as I've done here already with a housing trust fund. That's not subsidizing teachers and educational staff. It's not subsidizing. It is giving them a hand up, helping them with being able to live and incentivizing them to be able to live where they work. There's the overall spectrum when it comes to education. I come from a family of educators, so this is nothing new. The terms aren't anything new. We need the federal government to get out of education. The South Carolina General Assembly, along with local county and municipality officials, but even more so parents, can decide and should decide what type of education their child should receive. We know parents, we, and government here in the state, we know far better how to educate our children than someone in Washington, D.C. One size does not fit all, and we can make this happen. It can be done, but it takes people to stand up, speak out, and not be afraid to make it happen.
Sorry. Great, thank you. Mitch.
Sure. My name is Mitch Siegel. I'm the Democratic candidate for House District 118. I am a new resident to the Beaufort County Bluffton area, having moved here 4.5 years ago after 35 years in the Northeast. We've been coming to the Hilton Head area, to the Low Country, for 25 plus years, and finally decided that it was time to retire here. I spent 35 years as in healthcare IT and in IT in general, and retired 2 years ago, and decided this was not the time to retire. Similar to Michael, I have to say I am very pleasantly surprised and glad to hear that we agree on so many items. We both agree that we need to reform education. Act 388 has absolutely hobbled the state of education in South Carolina. And now on top of that, we are looking at the idea that Beaufort County would like to decrease property taxes and increase sales tax by 1 cent or 1% on property taxes, which is wonderful if you own a home. But for all of our residents who rent, they get zero benefit from a decrease in property taxes, and they get all of the discomfort of increased sales tax. It just does not work. My platform also includes an education component to it. My first thought is that the state has minimum requirements for which they have in code dollar amounts for which they need to fund education, their portion of it. The state fails consistently year over year to fund at 100% of what their contribution rate is. That needs to change. The state needs to step up to the plate. They need to pay their share. I'm also concerned that in the current environment, with a public health crisis going on, and the CDC is saying we'll double back around in the fall, I believe that we're going to need to reduce class sizes in the fall. We are going to need to ensure that our students are safe, that our workers, whether they be teachers, whether they be administrators, whether they be people working in the lunchroom, security people, whoever are in our schools, they all need to be safe. And part of what we're going to have to do is reduce class sizes. The next item that I've got a concern about is the idea of a uniform start to the school year in South Carolina. Having grown up in an area where every town had their own school district and every school district started at different times, the idea that we can't make our own decisions on when school should start so that we can build in time potentially for hurricanes, if we need to have the children go back to school because of hurricane days off. We had snow days up north. Down here, we don't have anything comparable, and we do have hurricanes. So we need the ability to make changes in our own scheduling. And I'm just very pleased to hear that Michael and I share so many of the same concerns about education and the fact that we can be doing it better. And unfortunately, at this current moment, we don't.
Okay. So Mitch, I'll stick with you for this first question then, which is, so what is your opinion of the state of public education in South Carolina today?
Having grown up in the Northeast where education was valued to a different level, and to growing up with a family tradition of immigrant grandparents who believed in education and that was the way we would get ahead, was by learning, by studying, by being actively involved, by parents being actively involved. My thought is the education levels in South Carolina are poor at best. I've heard the running joke, unfortunately, thank God for Alabama, or is it Mississippi? Because if it wasn't for them, we would be number 50 out of 50 when it comes to education. We should never be thinking that that is an acceptable belief, or that our students are at that point. The fact that we have a law on the books and our state Supreme Court has actually said that that is acceptable, to say that all we need to provide our students with is a minimally adequate education, in my mind, makes a mockery out of education. Minimally adequate. Do you really want the doctor who's treating your parents in a nursing home and dispensing medications to have had a minimally adequate education? That's not the way we're going to attract businesses to South Carolina. In order for us to grow, we need to have businesses willing to come here, willing to invest in our people. And if education is so poor at the national level compared to national level that companies don't want to come here, we're never going to see the types of jobs that we deserve to have.
Okay, thank you. Michael, same question. What's your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina today?
So my opinion on that, much like Mitch's, is that we are just ready to flower and blossom, but we're being held back by so many things. The state of education is so important, or education is so important, especially to economic development. And we see that here in local government, where we have prior to COVID-19. We could not find enough people that were skilled and educated to supply to new businesses that the Economic Development Corporation was bringing in, or the Department of Commerce was bringing in. There's a problem with that. There's another problem with, there's too many these tests. We're testing to death. That's a huge problem. Teacher pay is a huge problem. And yes, Mitch is right. They used to say, thank God for Mississippi. Now people in Mississippi are saying, thank God for South Carolina. And, some people, that's a funny thing. But for teachers and other higher education instructors and the parents, we should all take pause with that and wonder why. And there's so many answers. Being misled by the Federal Department of Education, which should be completely erased off the books. That's not in the Constitution. The state government needs to handle it. We need the right people at the state, the right people locally. That's one thing. How we're funded. We're being held back. Teachers are being held back because of funding. They're being held back because of school safety, as was mentioned a minute ago. And that doesn't mean just teachers. That's everybody. You can't acquire people if you don't have a safe workplace. So the state of education in South Carolina is ready to just burst into a beautiful flower if left to its devices. I'm a proponent of that parents should decide what type of education their children receive. If you want your child to be in parochial school, so be it. Homeschool, so be it. Private or prep school, public school, whatever, so be it. That's your right. But that means that parents, there has to be a parental involvement. I think that, over my life, I've started to see at least the last generation, maybe two, there's been less and less parental involvement. Now, I'm far from being one that would suggest that we legislate ourselves in parental involvement, but the conversation needs to be had. That needs to be said, and the public needs to hear that. Without that parental involvement, I see us falling. And it's like one of my mechanics that any of my mechanics, if I didn't provide them the tools to do their job, they're stuck and they're just there. Well, I don't want teachers to feel like they're just there, that they have no control. So the state of education can be 110% better, and it will be. We're getting there, but we need to change. We need to change in a lot of things to finally get there.
So speaking of that change, our second question speaks to priorities. If elected, what would be your first step you would want to take to try to improve public education in our state?
Well, the first thing is fully fund schools and simplify how they're funded. The testing, and I have some friends that are on school boards in Beaufort County and then up in Charleston County, and I hear about these tests, and I look at my kids. I've got 4 grown children and 8 grandchildren. 4 of them now are in school, and I've started to pay a little closer attention to that. These tests are ridiculous. I don't know how you can teach a subject, reading, writing, arithmetic, when you're always testing. So for someone who listens to teachers, because I'm far from one, I believe that needs to change. And then, as I just said, there needs to be the conversation started of more control at the local, county, municipality level, and then the state level. Not starting at the state level, but I'm all for single county districts, not all these districts all over the place, like in Anderson County or Orangeburg or Dorchester. Let them govern. Let them govern what they know about their people with the oversight from the General Assembly. And I think we'd be in a much better place.
Mitch, same question. What would you prioritize as your first step to try to improve public education?
Again, as Michael said, absolutely first item has to be full funding from the state to the schools. A large concern that I have is that in the last session of the current session of the legislature, bills have come up looking to allow parents to withdraw money from the public education system to send their children to private schools. And I have grave concerns over the idea that we have a system that is currently broken. We are not paying our teachers properly. We don't have the right issues going on in the schools. We don't have the right supplies, and we're going to turn around and take more money out of the system, which will guarantee that our schools fail. If we continue to allow money to come out of the public education bucket, we will see nothing but students failing. Unlike Michael, this is a place where I will say that I differ. I'm not a proponent of these county-wide school systems. I'm not quite sure exactly how much we have between a student going to school on Hilton Head Island and a student going to school in Whale Branch, 40 plus miles away. When schools are overcrowded in the southern half of the school district here in Beaufort County, Bluffton, Hilton Head, and we have schools that are empty or are less utilized up in the northern part of the county, nobody wants to see their child being bused 30, 40 miles away, 30, 40 minutes away. That was a big concern back in the 70s, back in the 60s. When I was a child, we were bused, 2 miles to go to an elementary school, and that was considered outrageous back then. So the idea that we have a school district that wants to maybe reapportion and realign where students go to school, and maybe they will go from Bluffton to Whale Branch, that just doesn't seem like it's in the student's best interest. So I would say that those are the items that I would be working on immediately.
Okay. So you each touched on funding a little bit, so we'll go there for just a moment. And we'll start with you this time, Mitch, and then move back over to Michael. We know that the state legislature, the General Assembly, they're the ones who create the formula for what it means to fully fund public education in South Carolina. And for the past 12 years, they failed to do that, currently to a tune of more than $500 per student. In our schools, this means more crowded classrooms. It means a lack of mental health professionals. Sometimes it means a lack of school resource officers. So knowing that funding is an issue, but it's also a complex issue, how would you address funding of public education in our state? And Mitch, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think one of the big things that the state has failed to do, we have the South Carolina Education Lottery Commission. We are part of the Lotto program, yet the state utilizes money from the lottery to apply towards paying for education rather than supplementing and giving our schools and our students and our teachers what they need in order to be productive. We need to stop utilizing the lottery as a way to fund primary funding for schools. We need that to be supplementing. We just have so many issues that we need to be addressing. And I'm sorry, Chris, can I ask you to go back to the question again so that I don't?
Absolutely. It's, if elected, what would you do to address the funding of public education?
Well, like Michael, I would say that we need to take a long, hard look at property taxes. The idea that as a primary homeowner living in the state of South Carolina, that my taxes do not go to pay for public education is just foreign to me. The idea that we expect renters to be paying, that we expect landlords to be paying, that we expect people with second homes, with businesses to be paying for education, when it is the people who in fact live here, who this is their primary home, their children, their grandchildren go to school here. The idea that we don't utilize property taxes was a nice idea in the 80s and 90s under 388. It was Prop 11 in California, which have all proven to be disastrous. So I would say that we need to take a more comprehensive look. And like everyone else, I'm tired of the fact that every year the General Assembly says, it's not a good year to address education. It's the first year of the session. We can't do it now. Oh, good Lord, it's second year of the session and we're up for re-election. We can't address education. How many times are we going to kick this proverbial can down the road before we actually do something about it? Are we going to wait for our schools to implode, before our educational system to implode, before we actually do it? I am prepared to go in and start working on education day one, not sit there. And if I have to, rile people in my own caucus or across the aisle by saying this is what we need to be working on, so be it. I'm happy to do that.
Michael, same question.
Thank you. Let me, before I go there, let me I think maybe I didn't explain what I meant by single district. What I mean by that is, like, Beaufort County has one school district. There are a bunch of schools, but there's one district, the Beaufort County School District. We have some in this state, like Anderson County and Orangeburg and Dorchester, that there are 2, 3, 4, 5, and sometimes more school districts, their own superintendent, their own school board. It's just a duplicity or duplication of services. Okay, so how do I address funding? Well, first of all, as we've said, it's a shame that my primary opponent isn't on here, because part of this is his fault. The LGF, Local Government Fund, and the other model for student or per pupil ratio into dollars is absurd. They've set it up for the counties to fail. Beaufort County is a perfect example of that. When you look at dollars spent per pupil, it's miserable. When you look at dollars spent per teacher, it's miserable. The money coming back from the local government fund is a joke, but nothing ever gets done about it. You know, the EIA or the whatever the EIA or whatever they call it. It's causing Beaufort County, which is a donor county to begin with, we have the lowest amount per pupil brought back home, and we have one of the highest rates of wealth in this state. The system is out of whack. So first of all, the models and the statutes have got to be overhauled. You know, there is in these right here, the code of laws, they get added to all the time. You hardly ever see things get taken out. Well, Mike Covert believes in removing things out of law, not adding more programs and more costs because it's not working. And those in the General Assembly need to be held accountable, and held accountable now, because it is failing, as was just said. And second thing is, when you start getting out of these statutes and pulling them away, a simpler model. This is not rocket science. A simpler model needs to be created. A simpler model where there is more accountability on the locality, where the people who live there that have children pay their property taxes, as do everyone else that pays for the schools. This configuration of the 388 may work in the upstate in Union County or Fairfield or Edgefield County, and that's fine, but it's not working over the entire state. So the argument is, will it ever be repealed? Probably it won't be, just because of the way the political ladder's stacked, but it certainly can be fixed. It takes people having ideas, much like Mitch's ideas. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those. But the ideas that are in the General Assembly right now they're just simply not working. I can get very passionate about it. It's simply not working. We've got to go to a different plan. Quit robbing Peter to pay Paul, as I learned as growing up. That is what the General Assembly is doing, and they're making a habit of doing it, robbing Peter to pay Paul.
So, Mike, I'll start with you. Our final question is going to speak to accountability, and you've touched on testing a little bit already. What do you think a successful accountability system for education in South Carolina should ideally look like, and where should that come from? Well,
that's a great question, the accountability. I love it, because you got people in the State House on both sides of the General Assembly who just quite simply, they're not accountable for their actions. You got people who swear that they are the conservative and would never raise a tax on anybody, and they turn around and go to Columbia when you're not looking and start raising taxes all over the place. So there needs to be accountability by General Assembly members and the localities. I have been very proud of my responsibility as a county councilman, working with the school board in Beaufort County, of which, how we do this here, the school board does not have complete autonomy of themselves. County council has only one authority over them, and that is to set the millage rate or approve the millage rate for their budget. Well, that's a huge thing, and it takes a lot of work all year long working with the school board. And I'm the first one in over a decade who voted no for a school budget, because they just kept adding and adding and adding. They didn't take things away. So the reason I say that conversation got to be started, and now it's a usual, customary conversation of, let's see what we can do to do better, be more accountable to Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, and not overspend our bounds. So those kind of things are important. Some other stuff from what I have been saying, parental involvement. I think that has to be recognized, that the importance of parental involvement is supreme. Again, I'll go back to this same sheet of music, that we should not put the onus of educating our children onto this hierarchy of politics. That's not how that's supposed to work. It needs to be parental involvement, the teacher, the school system, and then the state. There's a thing about for accountability. I don't believe performance pay is the answer. And the models that we've come up with for our housing trust that I had mentioned, and our pay system it has no performance base on there. It is a step system where teachers are paid better than the national median. And we looked that up just to be sure that we weren't going too far overhead without heavy tax increases. It's possible. It just has to be done. And then, there's conversation. I think I saw it on the outline from the questionnaire talking about, and I heard some folks in the General Assembly mention this, that teachers apparently across the state are not getting their 30-minute or 45-minute period to study, to plan, to prepare. I think that's absurd. While I believe the local school districts should decide, what goes on in their school districts, as a state, we should be, making it known that our teachers are people too, and they need that time. I don't know how you said you were an elementary teacher, correct? I don't know how you do it. I really don't. I've talked to parents who have been home teaching since COVID-19, and they're all singing the praises of teachers, that they want to get their kids out. They can't stand it. They don't know how you do it. Well, that says a whole lot. And we need to give the teachers the tools, those breaks, so you can do the job that you love. That's a job of passion. That's a career of passion. I don't think anybody ever, set the bank on fire by being a teacher. It's passion. And right now, the state and local and federal government are in your way of doing what you're supposed to do and want to do.
Thank you. Mitch, same question. In your opinion, what would a successful accountability system for education look like, and who should be in charge of that?
Well, to me, accountability needs to go back to the individual teachers. It needs to be able to be at the district level. Teachers, in my mind, are motivators first and foremost. They motivate children to want to learn. I've never met a teacher who went into teaching who wasn't motivated to help someone understand the world, to get a better, clearer picture of it, to be able to question critically and think outside of the box. I grew up in New York State. We had statewide exams. Every June, we sat and we took New York State Regents exams. And we had those state exams, but that didn't mean that a teacher spent the entire year teaching towards the exams. Teachers were allowed to explore what motivated a student and get them going. To me, one of the most important pieces of accountability was a teacher that I had in the second grade who recognized my love of reading. And towards the end of the year, my parents were called in to a guidance counselor and principal's meeting because I was reading in second grade at the sixth grade reading level. And the school district was concerned that I was being pushed, that I wasn't understanding. And I was brought in to actually sit down with the instructors, with the teacher, and with the principal, and have a conversation about what I was reading, about my understanding of it, and to show that, the teacher was accountable to me because she was motivating me. And to me, that is key and critical. Standards are fine. I do believe we have to have some standards, but I don't think that they need to be so onerous that teachers spend more of their time teaching towards tests. They need to understand what is going to get their students passionate about learning.
Thank you. So I would like to end by giving you each one last opportunity, maybe a minute, just to address anything that you wanted to expound on, or maybe just speak directly to voters on what you'd like to say to them or you'd like for them to know about you. And Mitch, we'll start with you, and then we'll finish up with Michael.
Sure. Thank you again, Chris. I want to get on the ground running day one of the legislative session. I want to be working on educational issues. I don't want to be kicking the can down the road. I don't want to say it's too hard for us to attack this problem. We know it's a problem. I want to be the solution, or at least part of the solution. However, that being said, I am not adverse to saying if we in fact need to raise a tax to actually get our children in a better place to run companies, to run their lives when they grow up, to take care of us as seniors when we grow up, and we need to pay for that, we need to, because right now our tax rate is among the lowest in the country. We are not putting enough, we're not investing enough in our children and our schools and our society. So if it means that we need to figure out where is that money going to come from, I'm willing to do the hard work and look for that. And I know that that is an anathema to many people, but that is where I believe.
Thank you. Michael, any final words?
Absolutely. And thank you for hosting. And Mitch, I appreciate you being here. And it's great to meet you. I hope we can meet in person someday. The subject of education, because I grew up in a family that were all educators except me, I get real passionate about it. And I had made some notes that teaching is a vocation, I believe, that requires a devoted individual who really has a strong sense of community. And I see, as being a local legislator for 4 years, working with school boards, talking with teachers, that if a teacher is frustrated or feels unsafe, they're going to be limited in what they do, and that whole thing is going to lead to job turnover. I think we're seeing that in Beaufort County. I think we're seeing that across the state. Salary and benefits are important, but I hear more teachers talking about getting burned out. I think we can fix both of those. I know we can fix both of those. I have plans that I have put pen to paper where we can give those teachers the ability to live, whether they buy a house or rent, but live in communities that they could not previously afford, such as the barrier islands and coast. Likewise, incentivize teachers to live in rural parts of the state where there may not be as many things that are available. But the incentivizing programs are available. You just have to think outside the box to put these things together. As anyone in this area, this region knows, in some parts of the state, I am not known for one to be shy on what I think. There are two things that I have, and I know you have, that we don't have time to waste, and that's time and money. And the people of South Carolina's time of investing in their children and their money is being wasted. It's not working. Our General Assembly, specifically the House, is not working. We've got to fix some things. I'm so excited. I hope that the voters see this when they vote June 9th in the Republican primary. They vote for Mike Covert, and we can continue this conversation throughout the summer and fall. Let's fix our education system once and for all and be the envy of the nation, not the end of some joke. Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank both of you so much for spending time with us talking about public education in South Carolina, and remind anyone watching that primaries are on June 9th. And primary elections, especially for statewide offices, are extremely important. Unlike this case, many of our elected officials run unopposed in November. June is the time when you can really make some change in the legislation in South Carolina. So thank you both again, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.